Of course, foraging isn't the only pattern of subsistence that most of us have never had any contact with or experience of. In our modern agrarian societies, dependent as we are on cultivation and on pastoral farming, we typically hear nothing about nomadic pastoralists. So it might be helpful at this point to look at a few nomadic pastoralist cultures in Asia and Africa, where this form of subsistence, although less common today than in the past, may yet be found. Let's begin with the Bakhtiyari culture, a tribal people who live in western Iran. For centuries, the Bakhtiyari have engaged in transhumance, which is defined as the migration of people and their livestock, their herds of sheep and goats, between highland summer pastures and lowland winter pastures. This is the pattern that the Bakhtiyari follow. In the spring, as their lowland pastures begin to dry up, with the heat of the approaching summer, the Bakhtiyari load up their black goat hair tents and their few possessions, and they guide their herds up into the highlands of the Zagros Mountains, which reach altitudes of 12 to 14,000 feet. It's a long and difficult journey through melting ices and the freezing water flows of the Karun River. This is dangerous enough for people, but even more dangerous for people who are busy trying to assist infant lamb and goat kids, let alone their own children. So how do they do it? How did these nomadic people traditionally cross the frigid river with all their family and animals? By using bits of the very animals they raise, in this case, goat skins. The healthy adults would inflate rafts made out of goat skins and then pull the elderly and infirm across the river on these rafts. It would take the Bakhtiyari about 5 days just to ford the river. And that remarkable achievement was just one small part of a tremendous journey that 5,000 people and about 50,000 sheep and goats would undertake, not just once but twice a year. Transhumance, remember? When the lowlands get hotter, the animals have a harder time finding food. So you take them up the mountains where things are cooler and food and water is more plentiful. And when the mountains get too cold, you take them all back down into the valley again. These are tough people who derive meat from their animals, clarified butter, milk, and wool for weaving rugs and carpets. The Changtang Mountains of Tibet, a name meaning the northern plateau, high in the Himalayas, are also home to pastoral nomads. These are the Changpa, the northerners, also known as Drukpa from the Tibetan word for nomad. A large number of these nomadic groups, some 200 to 300,000 pastoral nomads, live in the midst of mountains and salt lakes. Like the Bakhtiyari, the Changpa also move from place to place, leading their sheep, goats, and yak from one pasture to another. However, Changpa transhumance does not involve drastic shifts in elevation. They stay up in the mountains pretty much all year, only occasionally coming down the mountain to trade with lowland farmers. That's where the salt lakes come in very handy. You see, every year, groups of Changpa travel to Lake Drabye, a journey of 20 to 30 days. They bring with them yak, sheep, and goats, not for food, mind you, but as pack animals. The earth around the lake is covered with salt, which is loaded on the animals and carted down the mountain for trade to farmers in exchange for barley, which the Changpa can't grow themselves so high up. And they really are high up. The Changtang Mountains and Plateau, which cover some 2/3 of Tibet, span about 1,000 miles. And the average elevation is 15,000 feet above sea level. Imagine that, living that high all your life, caring for your animals in freezing temperatures. Temperatures in the Changtang Mountains can drop 80 degrees in a single day, along with sudden high winds and hailstorms, which is why their animals are so important, providing the Changpa with meat, obviously, but also milk for producing yogurt, butter, and cheese. The wool from their cashmere goats is especially valuable, good for trade and for weaving clothing. Sheep's stomachs are sewn up and used for storage, and intestines are used for making sausages. How about one more? If you head straight north from Tibet, you'll find yourself eventually in Siberia. Siberia is the largest province of Russia, something like 77% of Russia's land area. And a lot of Siberia is cold, which may be why, even though Siberia makes up the vast majority of Russian land, it is only home to something like 27% of the Russian population. But the Yamal Peninsula of Western Siberia has been home to people for around 5 millennia. Those prehistoric people might still be represented on Earth today by the Nenets, although the nomadic pastoralist subsistence of the Nenets is probably no more than, say, 4 centuries old. There are about 35,000 Nenets in Russia today, although only about 10,000 of them retain the old nomadic lifestyle, a lifestyle that was challenged for several decades by the efforts of communist Russia to compel them to settle down and join collectives. That, by the way, is not unique. The government of Iran has tried to make the Bakhtiari settle down, as have the Chinese. The government of China, which controls the Tibetan Changtang, has attempted to force the Changpa to settle down as well. Those 10,000 nomads in Siberia herd about 175,000 reindeer, guiding them some 200 miles every year between their spring and summer pastures. But once again, it's worth it. You see, from the reindeer, the Nenets acquire many things. The reindeer are used for transportation. Their skins are used as walls for their tents or chum, for clothing and blankets. Their meat is eaten. Even the blood of the deer is drunk by the Nenet. Deer's sinews are thinned into sewing thread. The lead deer even guides his Nenet herder, who might become lost in a storm, but the reindeer are never lost. And when a Nenet baby is born, it's immediately wrapped in deerskin, just as the dead are wrapped in deerskin for their burial.